Breaking news tonight. NBC News announced tonight that nightly news anchor and managing editor Brian Williams suspended without pay for 6 months. And here's the awkward part for us. I said at the top this was a little awkward. Here's why this is awkward for us on this show and for me as its anchor. We are reporting on this breaking news about the news division of which we are a part. No, NBC News will not make anyone available to discuss this story with us on the air.
Ooh, I'm sure NBC loves to hear from Rachel Maddow that she's a part of NBC News. I'm sure they love it, and that means Al Sharpton and all the rest of them. Anyway, welcome to the Malzberg panel. Joining us on said panel, Republican strategist and political consultant Noelle Nikpour, and commentator on religion, society, and pop culture, Brad Hirschfield. And okay, let's start with you, Noelle. The 6 months, and I guess it's going to cost him $5 million. I say he's done. He's never coming back.
You know, for NBC and their brand, he needs to be done. It's really sad, and it's, you know, they've launched the investigation. They're already, you know, finding more discrepancies. This is just not good. Everybody knows it's not good. As far as redeeming his brand, I mean, I wrote a book on branding, and I can't think of anything other than doing something for charity that he could do to redeem his brand. I actually think that, you know, maybe writing about some sort of a self-help on why I lie is destined for him. I mean, I just can't think of what kind of career he would actually go pursue after he has lied as a journalist.
Well, Brad, maybe he could write a book about his experiences in teaching the Dalai Lama everything he knows.
Look, Steve, I think what Noelle just said is really critical. I think about the Tylenol case years ago. He needs to, and still hasn't done, come out and make a very simple...
Was he involved in that too?
No, don't get me into trouble.
I thought I missed something.
No, but what they did is they came out and said it happened, it's real. He needs to come out and say, I lied. He still hasn't done that. I don't know if 6 months or forever or $5 million's enough or not enough. I know that he needs to come clean. And there's a simple way to do it. All he needs to say, I lied. And actually, everyone has lied at some point. And the funny thing about lies is we convert them into truths in our mind, which means everything I've done is understandable, but it's not excusable, and I have to be held accountable.
Except, Noelle, the difference here is that he makes his living. If there's one requirement that his job has, it's to be trusted. And if you have, I lied about the Iraq RPG, I lied about the Hezbollah rockets, I lied about seeing a body floating by, I lied about dysentery, I lied about being trapped in the stairwell with gangs. They had to rescue me from the hotel, and who knows what else. How will you ever trust it again, Noelle?
Well, you know, this is another thing, and if I were Brian Williams' wife, I'd be starting to ask him, were you really at dinner January the 14th? I mean, I would be, if I did business with Brian, if I knew Brian, I would start to think, wow, I wonder what else he said he was doing when he wasn't doing it.
Yeah, that's a good point, right, Brad?
It may or may not be. There's actually studies of this. People tend to lie in different parts of their life and be truthful in different parts of their life. So I don't know if his wife should worry, but I do know this. Independent of the amount of time and independent of the amount of the fine, there does need to be a full investigation. And until that's done, I don't care how much they charge him or how much bench time he has to do. The real issue, and here you're right, Steve, you can't restore credibility for anyone or even have a shot at it until first there's a full admission and then a full investigation. And when those two are done, then we can make a decision. Maybe he comes back and maybe he doesn't. But right now, there's still too much we don't know and should know.
Right, and just as a side note, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Mediaite is reporting that they're investigating not only this dossier of lies, we don't know how many, but also his expenses. So we'll see where that all leads. All right, let's talk about the president very shortly, and we hope to bring it to you live here on Newsmax Television. Is going to ask the Congress for authorization to go fight ISIS, and reportedly it's going to be a 3-year, permission slip, and with no geographical boundaries. This is, I don't know, Brad, this seems like quite a change from a guy. And by the way, they're now saying, yeah, it could include troops on the ground. I would not give that permission slip to this president because, quite frankly, I don't trust this president.
You know, it's not even a question of trusting the president or not. I don't know what this permission slip is for. It doesn't seem like anyone really knows. The whole idea of asking for that permission slip when you're not even going to be in office anymore, there's something off here, let alone the fact that it does feel like he is asking for the very things when a previous president asked them from him, he said absolutely not. So there's something off, and I think one of the insights here is everyone loves the war they want to fight and hates the war their political opposition wants to fight, and it's not clear we know how to get into these and get out of these. Having said that, ISIS does need to be fought, and that's going to have to be dealt with. I'm just not sure this is the way.
Noelle, I mean, I've heard Boehner express some skepticism, and certainly a lot of Democrats have as well.
Well, you know, Boehner said in an article earlier, he was quoted as saying he wished the Democrats would get off their you-know-whats and let's rock and roll. I think a lot of people, especially, you know, obviously the Republicans, are wondering, you know, why is Obama doing this? Why now? What all does this encompass? I mean, look, Obama has proven to pass things just like the Obamacare, where we don't know what's in it until it's been passed. We don't know what all this blankets are encompass, so, you know, you kind of have to look at who it's coming from.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. We also have a report. Remember the big meeting that supposedly took place at the White House with Muslim advisors or whatever, and the president, they wouldn't put out the guest list. Well, now we have a former Egyptian member of the Muslim Brotherhood in this country who says that he met with White House officials at a State Department meeting. I mean, Brad, to me, the Muslim Brotherhood is in every single mainstay of this government, and I think it's a very frightening proposition.
I think it's a dangerous precedent if it happened. And the interesting thing is, if they are a terrorist organization, should we believe them? But here's what I know, and I want to be fully candid. I have met with members of the Muslim Brotherhood, including some of their leadership in Egypt years ago. But I'm not the White House. And I think the miss is here, having said that, I think you should be able to talk to almost anyone. The more power and authority you have, though, the more circumspect you have to be. And I think it's really important that if the White House is going to do this, either they do it and come clean up front, say here's why we're doing it and why not and why, or be honest that some places they really are terrorists and there's no productive conversation to be had. The most important thing is I want to know what happened to that conversation. Was it a bunch of glad-handing, or did people actually speak some truth to the representative of the Brotherhood?
You know, Noelle, I wonder if the representative from the Muslim Brotherhood or the people he met with in the White House brought up to him, hey, why don't you mention the Crusades? And then a few days later, of course, he did mention the Crusades.
Yeah, I mean, nothing good, nothing productive. And I also think that this is just a it's confusion. Nobody really knows what's going on. No one knows, you know, what came out of these talks, if and any. And given the facts, nobody really knows.
And we won't know. With the most transparent administration in history, we know less and less. We're waiting on the president. We'll bring him to you when he comes out. But right now, we're going to tell you we'll be back with more of the Malzberg panel and hopefully President Obama. So don't you go away here on Newsmax Television. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are awaiting President Obama, and he is due to come out and address the nation from the White House and explain his request to Congress for authorization to take on the fight against ISIS. Seems a little late, and I don't mean him coming out. I mean the authorization to take on the fight against ISIS. Nonetheless, he's reportedly going to request a 3-year authorization. By my count, that's going to be basically half the time he's got left, and then a year and a half or so into the, or a little less than a year and a half into the term of the next president, and with no restrictions on the geography, they could go after ISIS anywhere. We'll see what he has to say. We'll bring it to you live, and then we'll get, of course, a reaction. Right now, we have our panel back with us, and Noelle Nikpour is here, as is Brad Hirschfield. And let's talk about something else, and we'll stop immediately if the president comes out. There's a poll out there. By me, it was commissioned by Media Matters, and so there's some doubt being cast on, because they kind of build up in this poll Elizabeth Warren, and then they asked likely Democratic voters in Iowa and New Hampshire, who would you vote for, Hillary or Warren, and Warren beats Hillary in both those states. But again, there is some kind of buildup of Elizabeth Warren before they ask the question. Nonetheless, that's still kind of kind of big, I think, in any way, shape, or form, unless the likely voters they ask, because likely voters are usually more a little savvy, or if there's such a word. So what about it, Noelle? I mean, will anything spur Elizabeth Warren to actually run, do you think?
Money. And look, MoveOn.org is already, trying to put out feelers in Iowa and getting a pretty good response about Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, like her or not, she stays true to her platform. She's a liberal. She's true to it. As for a lot of people on the left, view Hillary as somewhat of a moderate that goes towards the center. So if you really want a true blue left candidate, you're going to go with someone like an Elizabeth Warren, who would be very easy to get money from, like a Tom Steyer with EPA. She did challenge and fought Keystone Pipeline because of the EPA. So you've got to realize that she's going to be somewhat of a torchbearer for the liberal left.
Yeah, Brad, I mean, do you see her changing her mind and throwing her hat in the ring?
Oh, I think she could. I think she's done a whole variety of things over the last number of years to position herself toward this. I think the Democrats would be crazy to do it, but I think, you're right, she's a torchbearer. It just turns out that most Americans aren't interested in purists and torchbearers. And it's clear that Hillary has big numbers, but as I've said before, and I'll say again, whether you like her or you don't like, Hillary has a great track record of being able to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in the most unlikely of situations. So I think it's really an open question. I don't know what that poll means or doesn't mean, but I think Warren is a possibility and it could happen.
All right, let's go back to something Sharyl Attkisson said on this show yesterday, or the day before. And we were talking about Hillary's lie, because Sharyl Attkisson was on the trip with Hillary when Hillary had claimed she had a duck sniper fire in Bosnia with Chelsea by her side. And Sharyl Attkisson asked the question, why is it more important for Brian Williams to be honest than it is for Hillary Clinton? And she said Hillary Clinton, after that lie, went on to become Secretary of State, and now she could very well go on to become a President of the United States. So, Brad, if Brian Williams, I mean, he's out 6 months. Hillary's going to announce during that 6-month period, if she's going to announce, most likely, and he could be gone forever. Mm-hmm. So the question, all right, the president is coming. Let's go to President Obama right now.
Good afternoon. Today, as part of an international coalition of some 60 nations, including Arab countries, our men and women in uniform continue to fight against ISIL in Iraq and in Syria. More than 2,000 coalition airstrikes have pounded these terrorists. We're disrupting their command and control and supply lines, making it harder for them to move. We're destroying their fighting positions, their tanks, their vehicles, their barracks, their training camps, and the oil and gas facilities and infrastructure that fund their operations. We're taking out their commanders, their fighters, and their leaders. In Iraq, local forces have largely held the line and in some places have pushed ISIL back. In Syria, ISIL failed in its major push to take the town of Kobani, losing countless fighters in the process, fighters who will never again threaten innocent civilians. And we've seen reports of sinking morale among ISIL fighters as they realize the futility of their cause. Now, make no mistake, this is a difficult mission, and it will remain difficult for some time. It's going to take time to dislodge these terrorists, especially from urban areas. But our coalition is on the offensive. ISIL is on the defensive, and ISIL is going to lose. Its barbaric murders of so many people, including American hostages, are a desperate and revolting attempt to strike fear in the hearts of people it can never possibly win over by its ideas or its ideology, because it offers nothing but misery and death and destruction. And with vile groups like this, there is only one option. With our allies and partners, we are going to degrade and ultimately destroy this terrorist group. When I announced our strategy against ISIL in September, I said that we are strongest as a nation when the President and Congress work together. Today, my administration submitted a draft resolution to Congress to authorize the use of force against ISIL. I want to be very clear about what it does and what it does not do. This resolution reflects our core objective to destroy ISIL. It supports the comprehensive strategy that we've been pursuing with our allies and our partners. A systemic and sustained campaign of airstrikes against ISIL in Iraq and Syria, support and training for local forces on the ground, including the moderate Syrian opposition, preventing ISIL attacks in the region and beyond, including by foreign terrorist fighters who try to threaten our countries, regional and international support for an inclusive Iraqi government that unites the Iraqi people and strengthens Iraqi forces against ISIL, humanitarian assistance for the innocent civilians of Iraq and Syria who are suffering so terribly under ISIL's reign of horror. I want to thank Vice President Biden, Secretaries Kerry and Hagel, and General Marty Dempsey for their leadership in advancing our strategy. Even as we meet this challenge in Iraq and Syria, we all agree that one of our weapons against terrorists like ISIL, a critical part of our strategy, is the values we live here at home. One of the best antidotes to the hateful ideologies that try to recruit and radicalize people to violent extremism is our own example as diverse and tolerant societies that welcome the contributions of all people, including people of all faiths. The resolution we've submitted today does not call for the deployment of U.S. ground combat forces to Iraq or Syria. It is not the authorization of another ground war, like Afghanistan or Iraq. The 2,600 American troops in Iraq today largely serve on bases. And yes, they face the risks that come with service in any dangerous environment, but they do not have a combat mission. They are focused on training Iraqi forces, including Kurdish forces. As I've said before, I'm convinced that the United States should not get dragged back into another prolonged ground war in the Middle East. That's not in our national security interest, and it's not necessary for us to defeat ISIL. Local forces on the ground who know their countries best are best positioned to take the ground fight to ISIL, and that's what they're doing. At the same time, this resolution strikes the necessary balance by giving us the flexibility we need for unforeseen circumstances. For example, if we had actionable intelligence about a gathering of ISIL leaders, and our partners didn't have the capacity to get them, I would be prepared to order our special forces to take action because I will not allow these terrorists to have a safe haven. So we need flexibility, but we also have to be careful and deliberate. There's no heavier decision than asking our men and women in uniform to risk their lives on our behalf. As Commander-in-Chief, I will only send our troops into harm's way when it is absolutely necessary for our national security. Finally, this resolution repeals the 2002 authorization of force for the invasion of Iraq and limits this new authorization to 3 years. I do not believe America's interests are served by endless war or by remaining on a perpetual war footing. As a nation, we need to ask the difficult and necessary questions about when, why, and how we use military force. After all, it is our troops who bear the costs of our decisions, and we owe them a clear strategy and the support they need to get the job done. So this resolution will give our armed forces and our coalition the continuity we need for the next 3 years. It is not a timetable. It is not announcing that the mission is completed at any given period. What it is saying is that Congress should revisit the issue at the beginning of the next president's term. It's conceivable that the mission is completed earlier. It's conceivable that after deliberation, debate, and evaluation, that there are additional tasks to be carried out in this area. And the people's representatives, with a new president, should be able to have that discussion. In closing, I want to say that in crafting this resolution, we have consulted with and listened to both Republicans and Democrats in Congress. We've made a sincere effort to address difficult issues that we've discussed together. In the days and weeks ahead, we'll continue to work closely with leaders and members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. I believe this resolution can grow even stronger with the thoughtful and dignified debate that this moment demands. I'm optimistic that it can win strong bipartisan support and that we can show our troops and the world that Americans are united in this mission. Today, our men and women in uniform continue the fight against ISIL, and we salute them for their courageous service. We pray for their safety. We stand with their families who miss them, and we're sacrificing here at home. But know this, our coalition is strong, our cause is just, and our mission will succeed. And long after the terrorists we face today are destroyed and forgotten, America will continue to stand free and tall and strong. May God bless our troops, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the president talking about introducing a resolution that would grant him 3 years. No geographical limitations, although I don't know that he said that. No troops on the ground, no combat troops. That's not the goal, but he doesn't rule that out. He needs flexibility for unforeseen circumstances. Also, the 2002 Iraq authorization for war would be repealed. Talked about the coalition. Talked about only one option, which is degrade and ultimately destroy ISIS, or ISIL as he calls them. Not a lot new here. We are rejoined by Noelle Nikpour and Brad Hirschfield. Brad, not a lot new here except the 3-year authorization and not ruling out the use of troops on the ground.
I think that's about right. I hope everything the president just said is true, but he said something important, that this would be better with further debate and conversation, and I think that does need to happen. I'm not certain why it's a 3-year window when that's well past his term of office. I think the most important thing is he did say to the American people, this is not a war we are going to win and we must win it. That probably is going to demand some troops on the ground. You can't just bomb your way out of this.
Well, what bothered me was, he still uses that term, degrade and ultimately destroy. Why stick to that same line if now you're ratcheting it up a bit?
Because it's popular and he's trying to show bipartisanship. The person that I look to on the Republican side to actually break it down is a contractual lawyer by the name of Senator Ted Cruz. Although I'm not supporting Ted Cruz for President 2016, I do want to know, I think that he can break this down to show exactly what he is actually proposing.
All right, we'll be back with more analysis on the other side of the hour. We'll kick off the next hour with General Paulie Vallely. He'll give us his expert analysis of what the president just said from a military point of view, and we'll talk to others about it during the course of the show as well. I thank the panel, as always. We'll be back with Gimme 5. It's coming up next right here on the Steve Malzberg Show.